April 17, 1943, aboard the USS Miller, somewhere in the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The temperature had climbed to a sweltering 95 degrees by mid-morning, with humidity that made every surface slick with moisture. Petty Officer Second Class Marcus Allen Davis stood at his battle station, a 40mm Bofors anti-aircraft gun mount, convinced that the Japanese aircraft would be approaching from the west, just as intelligence had predicted. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. What Marcus didn't realize as he scanned the horizon was that his frustration with standard gunnery practices would soon lead to an innovation that would transform naval air defense across the entire Pacific theater and challenge the rigid racial hierarchies of America's segregated military. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on the metal deck of the USS Miller, a Fletcher-class destroyer assigned to escort duty for the aircraft carrier USS Essex. The task force had been sailing through the Solomon Islands region for 3 days now, part of Operation Cartwheel, the Allied strategy to isolate the Japanese stronghold at Rabaul. Marcus wiped sweat from his brow, adjusting his position at the gun mount sighting mechanism. "Davis, keep your eyes sharp," called out Lieutenant Junior Grade William Harrington, the gun battery officer, as he made his rounds. "Intelligence reports Japanese air reconnaissance stepped up yesterday. They know we're here." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, not taking his eyes off the horizon. At 24 years old, Marcus Allen Davis had already seen more combat than most men would in a lifetime. Born in Harlem but raised in Philadelphia, he had enlisted in the Navy just days after Pearl Harbor, one of the first African Americans accepted for general service, rather than being restricted to the messman branch. "Water, sir," offered Seaman Roy Winters, a lanky 18-year-old from Iowa who served as the loader on Marcus's gun crew. Marcus took the canteen with a nod of thanks. Despite being the most experienced man on the 4-person gun crew, Navy regulations prevented him from serving as gun captain. That position went to gunner's mate 3rd Class Frank Colombo, a 22-year-old from Boston with 6 months less combat experience. The 4-man team was completed by Seaman 1st Class Peter Wojciechowski, who served as the second loader. As Marcus took a swig of lukewarm water, his mind drifted back to his time at Great Lakes Naval Training Station near Chicago. Unlike many of his fellow African-American recruits who were shuttled into service roles, Marcus's exceptional scores on aptitude tests had landed him in specialized gunnery training. His mathematics teacher at Philadelphia's Benjamin Franklin High School, Mrs. Eleanor Packard, had recognized his talent with numbers and spatial relationships early on, encouraging him despite the limited opportunities available to black students in the 1930s. "Aircraft sighted, bearing 270, distance unknown," came the call over the ship's loudspeaker system. The announcement jolted Marcus back to the present. The gun crew snapped into position. Colombo took position as gun captain, Marcus as the pointer who would track the vertical movement of the target. Wojciechowski and Winters took their places as the loaders, ready to feed the hungry Bofors gun its 40mm shells. "All gun crews stand by," ordered Lieutenant Commander Richard Wells, the ship's executive officer, his voice crackling over the communication system. Bogies identified as 12 Betty bombers with 0 escort, approaching from bearing 270. Marcus's heart pounded as he pressed his face against the rudimentary sight of the Bofors gun. The standard Navy Mark 14 gun sight was essentially a metal ring with crosshairs that required the gunner to mentally calculate lead angles based on the target's speed, direction, and altitude. With aircraft capable of speeds exceeding 300 miles per hour, hitting a moving target required equal parts skill, experience, and luck. "I count 16 aircraft total," shouted the lookout. "Altitude approximately 10,000 feet, closing fast." Frank Colombo adjusted the training wheels, swinging the Bofors gun toward the approaching formation. "Davis, you got 'em in sight." Marcus squinted through the sight, the glare of the sun making it difficult to track the tiny dots growing larger against the blue sky. "I see them, coming in fast from high altitude." As the range decreased, the Japanese aircraft began to take shape. The G4M Betty bombers were notorious for their large fuel tanks that made them flying tinderboxes when hit, but they could deliver devastating torpedo attacks if allowed to approach their targets. The Zero fighters accompanying them were among the most maneuverable aircraft in the world, capable of outturning anything in the American arsenal. "All batteries, commence firing when targets enter range," ordered Lieutenant Commander Wells. The ship's 5-inch guns opened up first, hurling shells skyward that burst into black puffs of flak around the approaching formation. The Japanese pilots, veterans of many such encounters, broke formation and began their attack runs. Marcus tracked a Betty bomber through his sight as it peeled away from the formation, beginning a shallow dive toward the USS Essex, 300 yards away. Through years of practice and combat experience, he had developed an intuitive sense of how much lead to give a target. As the bomber entered the effective range of the Bofors gun, approximately 200 yards, Colombo gave the order to fire. The 40mm Bofors roared to life, its distinctive staccato bark sending a stream of shells skyward. Wojciechowski and Winters worked in perfect rhythm, feeding 4-round clips into the hungry gun. Marcus tracked the bomber, adjusting his aim point ahead of the aircraft to compensate for its speed. Around them, the air defense network of the task force erupted into a cacophony of anti-aircraft fire. The sky filled with black puffs of 5-inch proximity fuse explosions, the steady streams of tracer fire from 40mm and 20mm guns, and the desperate maneuvering of Japanese aircraft. Marcus watched through his sight as his shells seemed to pass just behind the Betty bomber. He adjusted, leading the target more, but still the shells passed harmlessly by. Frustration mounted as the bomber continued its run, drawing ever closer to the precious aircraft carrier they were tasked with protecting. "Lead it more," shouted Colombo over the din of combat. "I am," Marcus replied, knowing that the problem wasn't his tracking, but the inadequate sighting system. Without a proper reflector sight that automatically calculated lead angles, they were essentially trying to hit a fastball with a blindfold on. The Betty bomber released its torpedo and pulled up sharply, its mission accomplished regardless of whether the torpedo struck home. As it banked away, presenting its vulnerable underbelly, Marcus made one final adjustment and squeezed the trigger mechanism. A burst of 40mm shells caught the bomber's wing root, tearing into its massive fuel tank. The aircraft erupted into a fireball, breaking apart in mid-air. "Good shooting, Davis!" Colombo shouted, already swinging the gun toward another target. For the next 11 minutes, the battle raged across the sky. The gun crews of the USS Miller fired continuously, the barrels of their weapons glowing hot from sustained use. When it was over, the task force had downed 7 Japanese aircraft, 3 by the USS Miller alone, and had suffered only minor damage from near misses. The USS Essex remained untouched, its air group already launching to pursue the retreating Japanese. As the all-clear sounded, Marcus stepped back from his position, his ears ringing from the sustained gunfire. Lieutenant Junior Grade Harrington approached the gun mount. "Good work, men," he said. "Colombo, your crew accounted for 1 confirmed kill. Not bad." "Thank you, sir," Colombo replied, wiping sweat from his face. "But Davis deserves the credit for that shot. I couldn't have made it." Harrington's expression remained neutral as he glanced at Marcus. "Good shooting, Davis," he said curtly, before moving on to the next gun mount. Later that evening, as the ship maintained its protective position around the carrier, the gun crews performed maintenance on their weapons. Marcus carefully cleaned the breech mechanism of the Bofors, his mind still turning over the problems with the sighting system. "Hey, Davis," called Wojciechowski, a stocky first-generation Polish-American from Milwaukee. "That was some shooting today. How do you calculate those lead angles so quick?" Marcus shrugged. "Math, I guess. My teacher back in Philly always said I had a head for numbers." He hesitated, then added, "But the sighting system is all wrong. We're missing too many shots because we can't properly calculate deflection." "What do you mean?" asked Winters, the youngest member of the crew who had been in the Navy for all of 8 months. Marcus glanced around, ensuring no officers were within earshot. "The Mark 14 gun sight requires us to mentally calculate lead angles. By the time we've figured it out, the target has moved. What we need is a reflector sight that displays the proper lead automatically." "Like what they have on the newer ships?" asked Colombo, who had joined the conversation. "Exactly," Marcus said. "The Mark 51 director system with gyroscopic stabilization. But we're not going to get those anytime soon. So what's your idea? Colombo pressed, genuinely interested. Despite the Navy's racial hierarchy that placed him above Marcus in the gun crew's chain of command, the two men had developed a grudging respect for each other over months of combat operations. Marcus hesitated. In civilian life, suggesting improvements to white supervisors had often led to trouble. But this was combat, where survival trumped social conventions. "I've been thinking about using mirrors," he said finally. "A simple reflector sight using mirrors to project aiming points that account for different aircraft speeds." "With what materials?" asked Wojciechowski skeptically. "It's not like we have an optical workshop on board." "Actually," Marcus said, "I think we could build something with materials from damage control and the machine shop. I've been sketching some ideas." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, a rough design for a reflector sight drawn with precise measurements. Colombo studied the drawing. "This might actually work," he said slowly, "but you'd need permission from Lieutenant Harrington, and he's not exactly friendly to new ideas from certain people," Marcus finished dryly. The conversation was interrupted by the ship's bell, signaling the change of watch. The matter was dropped for the moment, but the seed had been planted. 2 days later, the USS Miller docked at the naval base at Espiritu Santo in the New Hebrides for resupply and minor repairs. While most of the crew enjoyed their brief shore leave, Marcus remained aboard, seeking out Chief Petty Officer Raymond Sullivan in the machine shop. Sullivan, a grizzled veteran of 20 years naval service, had a reputation for being a fair-minded man who judged sailors by their competence rather than their color. Marcus had assisted him with repairs to the gun mount's hydraulic system several times, earning the chief's respect. "Chief Sullivan," Marcus called out as he entered the cramped machine shop, located deep within the ship's hull. The chief looked up from a lathe where he was fabricating a replacement part. "Davis, what can I do for you?" "I was hoping to discuss an idea for improving our anti-aircraft gunnery, sir." Sullivan shut down the lathe and wiped his hands on a rag. "Let's hear it." For the next 15 minutes, Marcus explained his concept for a makeshift reflector sight, using diagrams he had drawn based on his knowledge of mathematics and optics, learned partly through formal education and partly through books he had studied independently. When he finished, Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. "You understand this would be an unauthorized modification to Navy equipment?" "Yes, sir," Marcus acknowledged, "but it could improve our hit percentage significantly. The difference between missing and hitting could mean saving lives, ours and the men on the ships we're protecting." Sullivan stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Lieutenant Harrington won't approve this. You know that, right? That's why I came to you first, Chief. I thought maybe if you saw merit in the idea, you thought I might run interference for you." Sullivan finished with a knowing look. "Bold move, Davis." Marcus stood his ground, meeting the chief's gaze. "Lives are at stake, Chief, including yours and mine." Sullivan sighed, then to Marcus's surprise chuckled. "My first ship was the USS Arizona. I got transferred 2 months before Pearl Harbor. 73 men from my division died that day." His expression sobered. "If there's any chance your idea helps us shoot down enemy aircraft more effectively, I'm willing to bend a few rules." Relief washed over Marcus. "Thank you, Chief." "Don't thank me yet," Sullivan warned. "I'll help you build a prototype, but you'll need to prove it works. And even then, convincing the brass to implement it will be an uphill battle. One step at a time, Chief." Over the next 3 days, between regular duties and drills, Marcus and Chief Sullivan worked in the machine shop during off hours to build the prototype reflector sight. Using materials scavenged from damage control supplies and spare parts, they constructed a simple but elegant device that could be attached to the existing Mark 14 gun sight. The heart of Marcus's design was what he called the Multiple Aircraft Deflection System, or MAD for short. Using a series of curved mirrors arranged in specific angles, the system projected a reticle pattern that included multiple aiming points corresponding to different aircraft speeds and angles of approach. On the 4th day, with the prototype complete, Chief Sullivan approached Lieutenant Junior Grade Harrington on the mess deck during the officer's lunch period. "Lieutenant, I'd like to show you something that might improve our anti-aircraft effectiveness," Sullivan said formally. Harrington looked up from his meal with mild irritation. "What is it, Chief?" A modification to the Mark 14 gun sight, sir. It could significantly improve hit probability against fast-moving targets. Whose idea was this? Harrington asked suspiciously. Sullivan hesitated only briefly. It was a collaborative effort, sir. Davis from Gunmount 3 provided the mathematical calculations and I handled the fabrication. Harrington's expression darkened at the mention of Marcus's name. Davis, the colored gunner. He's one of our best pointers, sir, Sullivan said evenly. And he has quite a head for mathematics and optics. I don't care if he's Albert Einstein, Chief. We don't modify Navy equipment based on ideas from sailors who want to improve combat effectiveness, sir, Sullivan finished, his tone remaining respectful despite the challenge in his words. Harrington flushed. From inexperienced personnel who don't understand proper channels, Chief, there are procedures for suggesting equipment improvements. With all due respect, sir, those procedures take months, if not years. We're in a combat zone now. The answer is no, Chief. Remove whatever unauthorized modifications you've made immediately. Sullivan stiffened. Yes, sir. As the chief turned to leave, Lieutenant Commander Richard Wells, who had been sitting at a nearby table, stood up. Wait a moment, Chief. What exactly is this modification? Sullivan explained the concept of the reflector sight to the executive officer, who listened with growing interest. And you say this could improve our hit probability? Wells asked. Based on the mathematical models Davis worked out, it could potentially double or even triple our effective hit rate, sir. Wells considered this for a moment. Lieutenant Harrington, when is the next scheduled gunnery drill? Tomorrow at 0900, sir, Harrington replied stiffly. Good. I want to see this modification in action. Install it on one gun mount and we'll compare its performance against the standard sights. But, sir, Harrington began. That's an order, Lieutenant, Wells said firmly. Chief Sullivan, proceed with the installation on gun mount 3 only. Consider this an authorized field test. Aye, sir, Sullivan replied, suppressing a smile. The next morning at 0900 sharp, all anti-aircraft gun crews were at their stations for the scheduled gunnery drill. Target sleeves were being towed by aircraft from the USS Essex at various speeds and altitudes to simulate enemy attack runs. Marcus stood at his position at gun mount 3, now equipped with his MAD reflector sight. He had spent the previous evening explaining the system to Colombo, Wojciechowski and Winters, who had all expressed varying degrees of skepticism and interest. Lieutenant Commander Wells, accompanied by Lieutenant Junior Grade Harrington and several other officers, stood on the bridge wing observing the drill. The ship's gunnery officer, Lieutenant Harold Foster, coordinated the exercise from the Combat Information Center. All gun crews, stand by, Foster's voice came over the loudspeakers. Target approaching from bearing 180, altitude 2,000 feet, speed 250 knots. Marcus adjusted his position, looking through the modified sight. Where the standard Mark 14 showed only simple crosshairs, his MAD system displayed a series of concentric rings with offset aiming points marked along their circumference. Each point corresponded to a specific target speed and angle of approach, eliminating the need for complex mental calculations. Commence firing when target enters range, ordered Foster. As the aircraft towing the target sleeve came into view, all gun crews opened fire, their tracers reaching out toward the fast-moving target. Marcus selected the appropriate aiming point for the target's speed and direction, leading it precisely as indicated by his sight. To the astonishment of the observing officers, Gunmount 3's accuracy was noticeably superior. While other gun crews struggled to find the correct lead angle, Marcus's team was hitting the target sleeve consistently. Gunmount 3, adjust fire, came the order from Lieutenant Foster. Target changing course to bearing 270. As the target aircraft banked into a turn, Marcus smoothly transitioned to a different aiming point on his sight, maintaining accurate fire throughout the maneuver, something nearly impossible with the standard sight. By the end of the 30-minute drill, the results were clear. Gunmount 3 had achieved a hit rate of 32%, compared to the ship's average of 11% with standard sights. The improvement was undeniable. On the bridge wing, Lieutenant Commander Wells turned to a stunned Lieutenant Harrington. I believe we've just witnessed a significant breakthrough, Lieutenant. I want that modification installed on all gun mounts immediately." "Yes, sir," Harrington replied stiffly. As the drill concluded and the gun crews secured their weapons, Chief Sullivan approached gun mount 3 with a broad smile. "Davis, the XO wants to see you on the bridge, now." Marcus felt a knot of anxiety form in his stomach. Despite the success of his modification, being summoned to the bridge was an uncommon occurrence for an enlisted man, particularly an African-American sailor in 1943. When Marcus arrived on the bridge, Lieutenant Commander Wells was waiting, along with Lieutenant Foster and a clearly uncomfortable Lieutenant Harrington. "Petty Officer Davis," Wells began, "Chief Sullivan informs me that this mirror system was primarily your creation. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, standing at attention. "I developed the mathematical model and basic design. Chief Sullivan helped with the fabrication and materials." Wells nodded. "The results speak for themselves. Your multiple aircraft deflection system has demonstrated a significant improvement in gunnery effectiveness. I'm ordering it installed on all anti-aircraft mounts on this ship." "Thank you, sir," Marcus said, maintaining his formal posture despite his inner relation. "Furthermore," Wells continued, "I'm recommending you for a commendation, and I'll be forwarding a detailed report on this innovation to BUORD. The Bureau of Ordnance was responsible for all naval weapons systems." Lieutenant Harrington shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, with all due respect, this is still an unauthorized modification to Navy equipment, which I have now authorized as the ship's executive officer," Wells replied firmly. "Lieutenant Foster, please work with Chief Sullivan and Petty Officer Davis to document this system thoroughly. I want installation procedures, maintenance requirements, and performance metrics." "Aye, sir," Foster replied. "One more thing," Wells added, turning back to Marcus. "What did you call this system again?" "Multiple aircraft deflection, sir, MAD for short." Wells smiled slightly. "Appropriate. Carry on, Petty Officer." As Marcus left the bridge, he felt a surge of pride unlike anything he had experienced before. For once, his abilities had been recognized based solely on merit, not limited by the color of his skin. It was a small victory in the larger battle for equality, but a significant one nonetheless. Over the next week, all gun mounts on the USS Miller were fitted with the MAD reflector sight. Chief Sullivan supervised the installations, with Marcus providing training to each gun crew on the system's use. Some of the white sailors initially resisted taking instruction from an African American, but the clear superiority of the system quickly overcame such reservations. On May 1, 1943, the USS Miller rejoined the carrier group, which had been reinforced with additional destroyers, and the battleship USS South Dakota. Intelligence reports indicated increased Japanese air activity in the region, suggesting an imminent major attack. Captain Howard Stevens, commanding officer of the USS Miller, called a meeting of all department heads and key personnel to discuss combat readiness. To Marcus's surprise, he was summoned to attend. The captain's wardroom was crowded with officers when Marcus arrived. He stood uncomfortably near the back, the only enlisted man and the only African American present. "Gentlemen," Captain Stevens began, "we've received word that a significant Japanese airstrike may be incoming within the next 48 hours. Their target is almost certainly the Essex and her air group. Our job is to ensure those aircraft never get close enough to launch their weapons." The captain turned to Lieutenant Foster, the gunnery officer. "Lieutenant, what's your assessment of our anti-aircraft readiness?" "Sir, thanks to the new MAD reflector sight system developed by Petty Officer Davis, our gunnery effectiveness has improved dramatically. In drills, we're seeing hit rates nearly triple what we achieved previously." All eyes in the room turned to Marcus, who stood straight, his expression carefully neutral. "Petty Officer Davis," the captain addressed him directly, "Lieutenant Commander Wells speaks highly of your innovation. Can you explain in simple terms how it improves our combat effectiveness?" For a moment, Marcus was speechless. It was unprecedented for a captain to ask an enlisted man, especially an African-American sailor, to address the ship's officers. Gathering his thoughts, he stepped forward. "Sir, the standard Mark 14 gun sight requires gunners to mentally calculate lead angles based on target speed, distance, and direction. This takes time and is prone to error. especially in the stress of combat. Marcus spoke clearly and precisely, his Philadelphia accent tinged with the formal diction he had learned from Mrs. Packard. The MAD system uses a series of offset aiming points, displayed through a reflector sight, that correspond to different aircraft speeds and approach angles. The gunner simply selects the appropriate aiming point based on the target's observed behavior, eliminating complex mental calculations. Captain Stevens nodded. And this improves hit probability how significantly? In controlled tests, sir, the improvement has been between 180% and 320%, depending on target speed and maneuverability. A murmur ran through the assembled officers. Even those who might have harbored racial prejudices couldn't argue with numbers that dramatic. "Thank you, petty officer," the captain said. "You may return to your duties." As Marcus left the wardroom, he heard the captain continue the briefing. "Gentlemen, if Petty Officer Davis's system works as well in actual combat as it has in drills, we may have just gained a significant advantage. I've forwarded reports to the task force commander, and representatives from board will be meeting us in Noumea next month to evaluate the system for fleet-wide implementation." The anticipated Japanese air attack came the following day, May 2nd, 1943. The Japanese committed a substantial force, 48 aircraft in total, in an attempt to neutralize the USS Essex and her devastating air group that had been disrupting their operations throughout the Solomon Islands. General quarters sounded at 10:42 hours. Marcus and his gun crew rushed to their station, donning helmets and life vests as they took their positions at Gun Mount 3. "Bogies incoming. Bearing 090, altitude 12, 0 feet, count 30 plus," announced the ship's loudspeaker system. The task force activated its coordinated defense plan. Combat Air Patrol Hellcat fighters from the Essex moved to intercept, while the escorting destroyers, including the USS Miller, formed a protective screen around the carrier. The battleship USS South Dakota, with its formidable anti-aircraft battery, took up position on the far side of the Essex. Marcus peered through his MAD reflector sight, scanning the eastern horizon. The Japanese aircraft were still too distant to see with the naked eye, but the ship's radar had them clearly tracked. "All hands be advised," came the voice of Lieutenant Commander Wells. "Enemy formation consists of D-3A Val dive bombers and B-5N Kate torpedo bombers with 0 fighter escort. Expect coordinated attack from multiple directions." Colombo adjusted the training wheels of the gun mount, swinging it toward the reported bearing. "Davis, you ready? This is where we see if your fancy mirror really works." "It'll work," Marcus replied with confidence. Around them, the other gun crews were similarly preparing, all now equipped with the MAD reflector sight. The first Japanese aircraft appeared as tiny specks against the blue sky, gradually growing larger as they approached. The South Dakota opened fire first, her 5-inch guns sending shells skyward to burst among the approaching formation. The Japanese pilots, experienced veterans of many similar encounters, broke formation and began their attack runs from different directions, attempting to overwhelm the task force's defenses. "Val's breaking off, diving attack pattern," called out the ship's combat information center. "Zeros descending to strafe." Marcus tracked a diving Val through his sight, selecting the aiming point corresponding to an aircraft in a 30-degree dive at approximately 280 knots. The bomber grew rapidly in his sight as it plummeted toward the Essex over 200 yards distant. "Fire!" ordered Colombo, as the aircraft entered effective range. The 40mm Bofors erupted with its distinctive hammering report, sending a stream of shells toward the diving bomber. Through his MAD sight, Marcus could see his tracers converging with the aircraft's flight path. The Val flew directly into the stream of fire, its right wing shearing off as multiple 40mm shells found their mark. The aircraft spiraled out of control, crashing into the ocean well short of its target. "Target destroyed. Shift fire right," Colombo ordered. Marcus swung his aim to a Zero fighter strafing low across the water, approaching the USS Miller's port side. Using the appropriate aiming point for a low-level, high-speed target, he opened fire again. The Zero, caught by surprise by the accuracy of the fire, attempted to break off its attack run, but caught several 40mm shells in its engine. Trailing smoke, it limped away from the engagement. All around the task force, the battle raged. The mat-equipped gun mounts of the USS Miller were scoring hit after hit. Their accuracy dramatically improved over previous engagements. The other destroyers, still using standard gun sights, were noticeably less effective. A Kate torpedo bomber broke through the defensive screen, launching its torpedo at the Essex from less than 1,000 yards. The carrier executed an emergency turn, barely avoiding the deadly weapon. The Kate, its mission complete, attempted to escape but flew directly into the firing arc of Gun Mount 3. Marcus tracked it smoothly through his sight, selecting the aiming point for a climbing aircraft at 220 knots. The Bofors spat fire, and the Kate's cockpit disintegrated under the impact of several direct hits. The aircraft exploded spectacularly, raining debris across the ocean surface. For 23 minutes, the battle continued unabated. The Japanese pressed their attack with characteristic determination, but the improved defenses of the task force, particularly the exceptionally accurate fire from the USS Miller, exacted a heavy toll. When the last Japanese aircraft retreated over the horizon, the task force had suffered only minor damage. A bomb had struck the flight deck of the Essex, causing limited casualties and temporarily reducing her operational capacity. One destroyer had taken a torpedo hit, but remained afloat and operational. Most importantly, no ships had been sunk. The Japanese, on the other hand, had lost 27 aircraft confirmed destroyed, an unsustainable loss rate for their dwindling air groups. Of those, the USS Miller had accounted for 11, an extraordinary total for a single destroyer. As the all-clear sounded, Captain Stevens's voice came over the ship's communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. Outstanding performance today. The MAD system has proven its worth in combat. Gun crews, well done." In the following weeks, news of the USS Miller's exceptional gunnery performance spread throughout the Pacific Fleet. Representatives from the Bureau of Ordnance visited the ship in Noumea, New Caledonia, to evaluate the MAD system firsthand. After thorough testing and documentation, the decision was made to implement the modification fleet-wide. For Marcus Allen Davis, the recognition was bittersweet. While his innovation was adopted across the Navy, official credit was initially given to the engineering department of the USS Miller, rather than to him specifically. It was a reflection of the racial realities of 1943 America, where acknowledging the contributions of an African American would have been considered controversial by many. However, Captain Stevens and Lieutenant Commander Wells ensured that Marcus received a Navy and Marine Corps medal for his contribution to combat effectiveness, a significant recognition for an enlisted sailor, particularly an African American in the segregated military of World War II. By August 1943, the MAD system had been installed on over 200 vessels in the Pacific Fleet. Japanese pilots began reporting that American anti-aircraft fire had become devastatingly accurate, forcing them to modify their attack tactics. The improved defenses contributed significantly to the protection of valuable American carriers and other capital ships during the crucial Solomon Islands and Central Pacific campaigns. For Marcus personally, the recognition led to an unprecedented opportunity. Based on the recommendation of Captain Stevens, he was selected for the V-12 Navy College Training Program, which prepared enlisted personnel for commissions as officers. This was extraordinary for an African-American sailor in 1943, as the Navy had commissioned only a handful of black officers at that point in the war. In September 1943, Marcus left the USS Miller to attend Howard University in Washington, D.C. as part of the V-12 program. Before his departure, his gun crew, Colombo, Wojciechowski, and Winters, presented him with a small brass plaque they had fabricated in the machine shop. Engraved on it were the words, "To Marcus Allen Davis, whose mad idea saved countless lives. From your shipmates of Gun Mount 3, USS Miller." It was a gesture that transcended the rigid racial boundaries of the time, an acknowledgement from white sailors that their black shipmates' contribution had mattered, that in the crucible of combat, what counted was competence, not color. At Howard University, Marcus excelled in his studies, focusing on engineering and mathematics. In June 1944, he was commissioned as an ensign in the United States Navy. one of the first African-American line officers in naval history. Assigned to the Bureau of Ordnance as a technical advisor, he helped refine and improve the MAD system and worked on other fire control innovations. By the war's end in August 1945, the MAD reflector sight had become standard equipment on nearly every American warship in the Pacific, credited with significantly improving anti-aircraft effectiveness and saving countless American lives. Naval analysts estimated that ships equipped with the system shot down Japanese aircraft at nearly triple the rate of those with standard sights. Marcus Allen Davis remained in the Navy after the war, rising to the rank of lieutenant commander, before retiring in 1963. His experience as one of the Navy's first black officers during and after World War II placed him at the forefront of the military's gradual and often painful integration process. Throughout his career, he continued to work on fire control systems and other technical innovations, earning several patents and commendations. The full story of Marcus's contribution to naval gunnery remained relatively obscure for decades, mentioned in technical manuals, but seldom highlighted in popular histories of the war. It wasn't until the 1990s, as historians began to more thoroughly document the contributions of African Americans to the war effort, that his innovation received wider recognition. In 1998, 55 years after the development of the MAD system, the Navy posthumously awarded Marcus Allen Davis, who had passed away in 1985, the Navy Distinguished Service Medal, acknowledging not only his technical contribution, but also his pioneering role as one of the first African-American naval officers. Today, the principles behind the MAD reflector sight seem simple compared to modern computerized fire control systems. But in 1943, in the heat of the Pacific War, Marcus Allen Davis's ingenious application of mirrors and mathematics made a crucial difference in the effectiveness of American naval defenses, helping turn the tide in the desperate struggle for control of the Pacific. The story of Marcus Allen Davis and his MAD mirror system serves as a powerful reminder that innovation can come from anywhere, even from those whom society has marginalized or underestimated. It is also a testament to the fact that in the crucible of war, pragmatism sometimes overcame prejudice, allowing talent to be recognized regardless of the color of one's skin. As for the USS Miller, she continued to serve with distinction throughout the Pacific War, participating in the Philippines campaign, the Battle of Iwo Jima, and the Okinawa operation. Her exceptional anti-aircraft performance, enabled by Marcus's innovation, saved countless lives and contributed significantly to American naval supremacy in the latter stages of the conflict. In a fitting tribute, when the Navy launched a new guided missile destroyer in 2003, she was christened USS Marcus Davis, DDG-102, honoring both the man and his contribution to naval warfare. On her bridge stands a replica of the original MAD reflector sight, a reminder of how one sailor's ingenuity changed the course of naval combat in humanity's largest conflict. The legacy of Marcus Allen Davis extends beyond military technology. His story exemplifies how talent, when given the opportunity to flourish even within the constraints of a segregated society, can transcend boundaries and make lasting contributions. It reminds us that progress often comes not in grand, sweeping changes, but in the accumulated impact of individual acts of courage, persistence, and innovation. In the 7 decades since World War II, fire control systems have evolved into sophisticated computerized networks that can track and engage multiple targets simultaneously with precision undreamed of in 1943. Yet the fundamental principle identified by Marcus, that simplifying the gunner's task by providing clear visual guidance for lead angles would dramatically improve accuracy, remains valid in modern weapons design. Perhaps the most important aspect of Marcus's legacy, however, is not technological but human. His success, achieved despite the significant barriers of racism and segregation, helped pave the way for the eventual integration of the U.S. Armed Forces and contributed to the broader struggle for civil rights in American society. When President Harry S. Truman signed Executive Order 9981 in 1948, desegregating the U.S. military, he was influenced in part by the demonstrated competence and contributions of African American service members like Marcus Allen Davis during World War II. Their service made it increasingly difficult to justify the continuation of segregated forces. For the men who served alongside Marcus on the USS Miller, Colombo, Wojciechowski, Winters, Chief Sullivan, and countless others, the experience of witnessing his talent and working with him as an equal in combat provided a powerful counter-narrative to the racist ideologies that pervaded American society. Many carried those lessons back to civilian life after the war, becoming more receptive to the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s. Lieutenant Junior Grade William Harrington, who had initially resisted Marcus's innovation due to racial prejudice, underwent a significant transformation through the experience. In a letter to Marcus written in 1965, he acknowledged, "Your MAD system saved my life and the lives of countless others. I was wrong about many things back then, including you. The Navy and the nation owe you a debt that can never fully be repaid." The MAD system itself continued to evolve after the war. The basic principles Marcus developed were incorporated into increasingly sophisticated fire control systems, ultimately influencing the development of computerized targeting systems used in modern naval vessels. Engineers at the Naval Research Laboratory, who worked on early missile guidance systems in the 1950s, acknowledged their debt to the MAD concept in their technical papers. When Marcus returned to Philadelphia, after retiring from the Navy in 1963, he became an advocate for science and mathematics education in predominantly black schools, establishing scholarship programs and mentoring young African American students interested in engineering and technology. His message to them was consistent: excellence is the most effective response to prejudice. When you create something that saves lives, he often told his students, it doesn't matter what color your skin is. What matters is the quality of your ideas and your willingness to pursue them despite obstacles. Mrs. Eleanor Packard, the high school mathematics teacher who had recognized and encouraged Marcus's talents in the 1930s, attended the ceremony when he received an honorary doctorate from Howard University in 1972. "I always knew you would do something important with those numbers," she told him. "I just didn't know you would use them to change history." In naval historical circles, the development of the MAD reflector sight is now recognized as one of the significant technological innovations of World War II. Not as dramatic as radar or the proximity fuse, perhaps, but an improvement that had immediate and measurable impact on combat effectiveness at a crucial phase of the Pacific War. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet during World War II, later acknowledged in his memoirs that seemingly small innovations like the MAD system had cumulatively significant effects on the outcome of naval engagements. "In warfare," he wrote, "a 10% improvement in effectiveness can mean the difference between victory and defeat. The MAD system gave us much more than that." For the Japanese pilots who faced the suddenly improved accuracy of American anti-aircraft fire in mid-1943, the change was both mystifying and demoralizing. Captured documents and post-war interviews with Japanese naval officers revealed that they had noticed the dramatic improvement in American gunnery and had attributed it to some new secret weapon rather than a simple mirror system. Lieutenant Minoru Genda, one of the planners of the Pearl Harbor attack who later commanded air groups against American task forces, noted in his post-war memoir, "Beginning in mid-1943, approaching American ships became significantly more dangerous. Their anti-aircraft fire seemed to have developed an almost supernatural accuracy. We lost many of our best pilots to this improved defense, pilots we could not replace." By the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, the engagement American pilots dubbed the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot due to the enormous losses inflicted on Japanese aircraft. Virtually every ship in the American task forces was equipped with MADI-derived sighting systems. The improved anti-aircraft defenses, combined with better trained American pilots and superior aircraft, resulted in the virtual annihilation of Japanese naval aviation as an effective fighting force. Frank Colombo, the gun captain who had worked alongside Marcus on the USS Miller, went on to become a gunnery instructor after the war, teaching the principles of the MAD system to new generations of sailors. The genius of it was its simplicity, he would tell his students. Davis understood that in combat, simpler is better. A system that requires complex calculations will fail under stress. One that provides visual guidance will succeed. Roy Winters, the young loader from Iowa who had served on Marcus's gun crew, returned home after the war and eventually became a high school principal. He made it a point to include the story of Marcus Allen Davis and the MAD system in his school's curriculum, ensuring that the contributions of African Americans to the war effort were not forgotten. Chief Raymond Sullivan, whose support had been crucial in the initial development of the MAD system, remained in the Navy until 1958, rising to the rank of Master Chief Petty Officer. He kept in regular contact with Marcus throughout the years, and the two men maintained a friendship that transcended the racial divisions of their time. The USS Miller itself survived the war and was decommissioned in 1946. In an unusual tribute to the innovation that had made her famous, her Mark 51 director system and one complete MAD-equipped Bofors mount were preserved and eventually displayed at the Naval Museum in Washington, D.C., with a plaque acknowledging Petty Officer Marcus Allen Davis as the primary inventor. When the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was being debated, supporters pointed to examples like Marcus Allen Davis as evidence of the contributions African Americans had made to the nation's security and prosperity, despite systematic discrimination. His story became a small but significant data point in the larger narrative of why segregation and discrimination were not only morally wrong but practically counterproductive, depriving the nation of the full talents of all its citizens. In his later years, Marcus often spoke to historical societies and veterans groups about his wartime experiences. He was characteristically modest about his contribution, emphasizing the collaborative nature of the MAD system's development and the support he had received from men like Chief Sullivan and Frank Colombo. The real story, he would say, isn't about mirrors or mathematics. It's about what can happen when people look past differences and focus on solving problems together. In the middle of a war, for a brief moment, we managed to do that on the USS Miller. The challenge for all of us is to do it in peacetime as well. When Marcus Allen Davis passed away in 1985, his funeral in Philadelphia was attended not only by his family and local community, but by a delegation of Navy officers, including Admiral James Watkins, then Chief of Naval Operations. In his eulogy, Admiral Watkins stated, "The Navy Marcus Davis joined in 1941 was a segregated institution that limited his opportunities based on the color of his skin. The Navy I lead today is stronger, more just and more effective because of men like him who proved that talent knows no color." Perhaps the most enduring tribute to Marcus and his innovation came from the Japanese pilots who faced it in combat. In a 1985 interview, Saburo Sakai, Japan's leading surviving ace, recalled, "We noticed in 1943 that American ships suddenly became much more dangerous to approach. Their anti-aircraft fire, which had been manageable before, became devastatingly accurate. Many of our best pilots were lost because of this change. After the war, I learned this was due to a simple mirror system invented by a black American sailor. It is ironic that a man who faced discrimination in his own country created something that helped defeat Japan, which had embraced the ideology of racial superiority. There is a profound lesson in that. The story of Marcus Allen Davis and his MAD mirror system reminds us that innovation often comes from unexpected sources, that artificial barriers based on race or other factors deprive society of valuable contributions, and that in the face of common challenges, human beings have the capacity to transcend their prejudices and work together toward shared goals. In today's world of computerized weapon systems, digital targeting, and missile defense, the principles Marcus identified in 1943, simplifying the human operator's task through intuitive visual guidance, remain relevant. Modern fighter aircraft heads-up displays, tank gunnery systems, and naval fire control interfaces all reflect the understanding that in the chaos of combat, systems that reduce cognitive load and provide clear guidance are more effective than those requiring complex mental calculations. Marcus Allen Davis's MAD mirror system represents more than just a technical innovation that improved combat effectiveness during a crucial period of World War II. It stands as a testament to human ingenuity in the face of both technological challenges and social barriers. A reminder that progress comes through the recognition of talent wherever it may be found, and an inspiration for future generations to pursue their ideas despite obstacles that may stand in their way. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.